Okay, welcome to the PPC Unfiltered podcast. Cory, Lindholm, Michael Nadalin, PPC Unfiltered. Hope you're all having a wonderful week. Cory and I are changing the format of this podcast over time. So if you are a old school listener, which a lot of people are, just letting you know that things are starting to change a bit because we're wanting to take it in a different direction based on our own vision of advertising, how we do things, and how we want to present content to the world. So get ready. It's going to be at times more technical, more analytical, sometimes more high level, sometimes more granular, but more going to the Google Ads side and the advertising side more than some of the other topics that we've been talking about. But anyway, Cory, how are you going, my
Thank you for
amazing
setting the
best friend
stage.
in the world?
Things are good. We're moving into the summer season, so the weather's turning around. Beautiful. Good time for the agency. I've got some new clients coming on, some big ones. So good, fun new challenge, getting them all integrated. How's things for you guys?
Man, it's good. It's busy. It's very busy. And we've actually started running our own ads now, and I've got a lot of meetings booked. So the craziest thing is doing what you do for others to make them money, and then you start doing it for yourself. What an idea. And then you're overwhelmed with leads. And now I actually understand why most of my clients are like, dude, I need you to turn down the ads because too much is happening. I have that today. I've got 4 new business calls today. I'm like, here we go. The party's beginning. But it's not summer in Australia. It's winter, and it's really cold, man. It's really cold. So,
well, can I just say real quick that that's an interesting thing to do for your own agency when you've never the service that you've provided for nearly a decade to start actually doing it for your own business. It creates a really unique challenge, and I think you actually learn a lot because you have like an emotional connection to the data that you're seeing, and you can kind of get a little bit more in the head of what a client might see as well. So that's an interesting thing.
And I recognize for me, I was doing a lot of YouTube content back in the day, and I'm like, but I don't do, my service is not organic YouTube. So how am I going to really break through and get that 1% result when I'm not doing that day in and day out? With like advertising, I've been doing it day in, day out for like literally 10 years. So I've just been able to do really quote unquote simple things and get really high quality leads at really cost effective because I'm just doing the thing that works. But you're right, like the data side is I wouldn't say I'm more invested in it. I'm just more curious about it because the nature of the industry that we're in is a highly competitive industry with a lot of other people in it as well.
Yeah.
The wild thing is, man, most people, as we know, we're going to have these conversations. Most advertisers are not good at advertising. Like most people are not good at their job. So being able just to kind of tap into that, the 1% of things that work and get the 1% of results, it's nice. It's reaffirming. It makes me feel good about myself.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's jump into it today. So we've got a first topic, which I think is a really good one, Cory, that you've come up with. And I'm going to press the marker point, where it is the trade-offs in PPC. Mm-hmm. Now, I'll let you open up the conversation about this one because I actually, like, when you mentioned this, I'm like, this is good because this is pretty much the biggest conversation that keeps happening online, on Reddit, on LinkedIn, is the trade-offs for both sides. So
yeah, to set the context, really, any new technological change, whether that's this revolution of AI, whether it's a new feature or a new platform in the marketing sphere, you're going to have people that are creating and building new tactics and strategy and publicizing those things about that new technology or that new strategy, whatever, right? But within that, we always have come back to, you and I in this podcast, first principles, because those at majority of the time don't really change that much, right? We're talking 80-85% or something, right? If we had to put a number to it. It's those little things that are going to change because we have to keep up with the new settings. Sometimes we have to take those new settings in order to take that old principle and bring it along into this new environment where these new settings or these new tech are, right? But within that conversation, it always comes back to advertising or marketing is going to be an investment, right? You're pushing money from one place to another. You're trying to maximize profits, whatever it is. So in that, you're inherently always going to have trade-offs. Now, the thing is, as great on paper as that sounds and makes sense logically, great. There's going to be trade-offs. The reality is, going back to you talking about now doing ads for your own business, sometimes when the business, especially when the business is not doing well, you can get really emotionally attached to every click, what the
Yeah.
cost per clicks are. You sort of hyper focus on the very granular details that in some cases can really get in the way. And then you start looking for perfect strategies, right? Perfect hacks, things that are going to cover everything you could possibly think of. So I just wanted to have a chat today and talk about the most common trade-offs that we see consistently year over year, regardless of the technical landscape and the changes in
Yeah.
the Google Ads UI.
Love
Fair?
it, man. So I
All right.
reckon the first one is the obvious one: automation versus, or automation slash AI versus manual control.
Mm-hmm.
Shall we start there? What are
Let's
your
go.
thoughts?
That's actually literally the same one I was thinking. Yeah, because
I know
look,
you mentioned that.
right. Well, that sounded familiar. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the thing is I think at the end of the day, if I had to really underline it, automation is it's not unless you set it up this way, it's not bidding for margin, right? You need to be giving it the things, which is the control side, that are going to lead it in the right direction. But regardless, you do need to find that trade-off. There's going to be a middle ground. This will be the whole theme of the topic, is finding that balanced middle ground using data analytics. That is your tool for this, is finding how much control can we sacrifice in order for these algorithms to find the right audiences, to design the right messaging and show the right messaging to the right person at the right time. So we're trying to both use the automation for its own signals that it's figuring out, as well as control not only the insights we're getting from the things that we're trying to accomplish, but also so that we can keep making sure and coaxing it along the way and it doesn't fall off of a cliff.
Yeah, I love it. I think, yeah, the thing that pops to mind for me is you've got to program the machine and then the machine will work for you. But Google is not like a out of the box solution, cookie cutter thing. You've got to really set the parameters, the outcomes, and the guidance for it. And one of the biggest things is just making sure that all your outcome based points that you want to be achieving, be it conversions or whatever results you're achieving, you have maximum manual control at the start over that to ensure that you're really going to Google or Facebook, whatever it is, this is the outcome. And you've done everything you can to maximize the amount of those volumes of that early on. So then when you start to transition over to more of an automation model, you can give it that direction. The biggest risk is people still treat these solutions like they're an out-of-box solution that's going to give them some magical hack. They flick on a button and then it just fixes the business,
Right.
rather and without direction, without clarity. And people are like, yeah, we know what we want. It's like, you actually don't, because when you dive deeper with a lot of businesses, their tracking, their settings, their everything, it's not done properly. So if it hasn't been done properly, what are you giving the machine? Like the whole garbage in, garbage out is, if you're not giving a very clear, specific outcome and you've given enough data for it to work with, that's when bad stuff happens. But when you do have that, and this is why people work with us, is so that when they start off with, we have more aggressive control over it. So we are really based on our decades of experience, is that we're really getting to that outcome point very manually, very meticulously. So when we start to transition over to these automated models, the automated model knows exactly the specific direction to go in, not a general direction, but very specific. And that's why you and I obviously get really good results, is because it's not one or the other. It's it's one and the other. But I would always say, and this is, I don't know if this sounds like common sense, but it's usually not, you've got to start off with maximum manual control as possible, in any way possible, especially in a world where the Google and Facebook products are moving more to the automation style, where it's just put in some assets and we'll do whatever you can do to be macro controlling is do that. So that's just my thoughts on that.
Okay. Next one I wanted to cover was scale versus granularity. This is really relevant because I think when we get into the world of looking for the perfect strategy, the next shiny object, structure, or whatever it is, we really have to contend with over optimization, where we're actually hurting results by getting way too granular with our structure, and we're spreading the data signals out, which makes it hard for the automation as well as the human to analyze that data and make optimizations around. So that is something we always got to be careful of, is if we get way too granular, not only are we maybe making our jobs harder, but we're actually adding busy work that
Yeah.
isn't maybe going to lead to the high impact value that we're actually getting paid to do as PPC providers.
Yeah. So let's define what scale and granularity are, because scale is an interesting word. I'd love to know what your definition is so we can map that out mentally. But granularity, that is very interesting, because I think I'm granular
Mhm.
based on my direct experience. But I've seen accounts that are granular. I'm like, this is disgusting. As in,
Mhm.
like, every keyword has its own campaign.
Yeah.
Like, you know, those ones where it'd be like a phrase match campaign and then an exact match.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway, that's like, I still see it. I still see it. It's
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah.
So, what would you define as the scale approach versus the granularity approach?
I think just to make it more clear, the difference outside of the word scale, to your point, because that can be really really vague. It's essentially, are we talking about how granular of a structure do we want to get versus how consolidated and
Yeah.
simplified of a
Yeah.
structure do we want to get, right? So if you want to really say a difference, it's really going to be consolidation versus granularity and finding that balance. Now, the reality is, as you test and experiment into new ventures within the account, you're launching new products, you're going into new territory in terms of targeting, you're trying out new messaging, you're actually going to have to find at certain levels that some things need to be very granularly controlled and set up, and other things actually don't do well at that level of granularity,
Yeah.
and you actually need to consolidate. And sometimes, you start consolidated and you get more granular. I tend to default that way. Really, again, a lot of nuance involved in that, but I say you want to start a little bit more simple, consolidate the data signals, and you can always get more granular later. There are going to be exceptions to that, of course.
Love it. I'm just writing down some notes right now. So yeah, I do the same. I think starting off with like a simple but clear structure is the most important thing. So that way, consolidate. It's not an all or nothing, as in like you put
Right.
everything in one campaign or you split them all out individually. It's the middle area, and the consolidation could even be like product groups or keyword themes or different lines of business. The granularity is excellent over time. I've seen a lot of people destroy their accounts basically by going too granular at the start.
Oh, yeah.
And then like nothing serves, not enough data, budgets are split out to like $2 a campaign type of You see those ones where it's like their budget is, whatever it is, a few $1,000s a month. But then because they've got so many campaigns, it's got like $5 a day, $10 a day, but the cost per click is like $6. So you're only going to get 1 to 2 clicks a day, where the data, the significance of the data is not there. The other side of it is the consolidated approach. I actually feel like people do that on the other side equally as much, but in such a lazy way.
Yes.
That it's very, there's just too much in one place, where if you need to do any sort of reporting, it's almost near impossible. And if you need to then go, wow, these keywords, these products are going really well, let's amplify it. It's like, well, now I'm going to have to split it out. So like that granularity comes. So you got to decide. For my direct experience, it's use consolidation just for data acquisition to really see what it's like when you've got money going to one pool. But once you start to find trends, you do start to pull it out dependent on. But every business is different.
Right.
And like it's all in the middle. And it's got to be dependent on the business, the lines of product, the intent. Because there's so many businesses that there would be one keyword in the market that just like sucks out all their budget, but it may not be the highest intent keyword. Or there might be a product that's really popular, but the margins aren't good, and it just cannibalizes the whole budget. So
that's why you need to work with somebody that actually knows what they're doing, because they're going to help you manage all those things. The risk mitigation, where's your level of risk tolerance, what kind of budget do we have available, what marketplace is actually available for that new launch. They can assess those things for you, and they can help you decide, or they should be probably doing it just for you. This is the structure we're going to start with, but believe me, we're going to be testing other things, and those things aren't always going to work out. If you're being with someone that's real, they're going to tell you straight up, this may or may not work. We're going to do the best thing that we can here, but sometimes you got to pull it back, and it's kind of frustrating because you want that level of control. You have an intuition through experience that it is going to work better, and sometimes you just don't. In reality, folks, you just don't always have enough data to make this data-driven decision. Sometimes you just won't have it, and you have to go with your own experience as an expert and say, even though I don't have the data yet, we've given it as much time as we can, as much budget as we have available. But with our expertise, I do still feel it's worth testing, moving this to a little bit more of a granular structure for this element of the account. So it's going to be something you got to feel out and you got to try over time.
Yeah. How practical is that? I don't know. It's one of those things where you just got, like, it is very direct based on your own data and just looking at the data over a certain amount of time and making that decision. I do think leaning more on the granularity side is a bit better than the consolidated approach, just from my personal opinion. But every business is different. And some businesses, if your budget's small, it's better to have a consolidated approach versus if you've got a larger budget, it's over time, it tends to be better with granularity for better reporting, better structure, and just better control.
Okay. Shall we move forward on the next piece? All right. So this is as someone who deals in large e-commerce, large product catalogs, complex catalogs, this one is always top of mind for me, which is short-term ROAS versus lifetime value. Now, not every business has it where lifetime value is very relevant for them. I totally acknowledge that. But for a lot of businesses, they're actually just kind of using that as an excuse. They don't really know that. They're just sort of like, they don't really want to do the analysis, to be completely honest with you. They're just like, it doesn't really apply to us. And I look at the numbers and there is clearly lifetime value here that we're not utilizing within our strategy. So, if this is relevant for you and you can back that with some data, there is going to be a trade-off here where sometimes you're going to feel sort of like a cash flow pressure that really loves immediate return on ad spend. It's just that like sort of serotonin drip of like, all right, it's profitable right now. But in reality, especially at scale for larger businesses, you really are hurting your own self long-term by over-focusing on that immediate reactionary metric that is return on ad spend. Because all you're doing now is evaluating right now it's profitable, but you're not doing what potentially your other competitors in the same auctions as you are doing, which is they're actually including and integrating lifetime value into their bids, which means they can bid more aggressively. They can capture market share at a much faster rate than you can. And you might not even realize you're being left behind unless, of course, you have their data, which you won't. So it's something that I'm going to usually try to guide a client towards if they're not already thinking that way. How can we integrate and evaluate lifetime value, and how can we put that into our strategies? It's not going to maybe always be the first thing that we're thinking of or considering. It may not be the number one driving factor in our strategies or our tactics, but it does have to be something that's going to be weighed against short-term ROAS, because not everything is going to work one way or the other. It's not like lifetime value or nothing. Sometimes short-term ROAS is actually going to be the most appropriate thing to be using as a North Star.
But what do people want, mate? You look at the videos on YouTube. Is anyone going how to increase LTV, or are they going how to increase your ROAS this week by 200%?
Well, again, ROAS it's a sexy thing. Any immediate gratification. Humans, we are driven towards that immediate gratification. So it makes sense, and I empathize with stakeholders on that. But again, how much could you be missing out on is the real question.
Yeah, and it depends. And once again, always dependent on the business if they have the availability to do repeat sales and increase that lifetime value, which does move beyond the advertising, and it comes to the business vision of like, how are we going to get people to repurchase in 3, 6, or 12 months? How do we keep them engaged? And then you got to think about email marketing, and that's another strategy that the business has ownership over and responsibility as well. And if you're an advertiser like us, we tend to have these conversations with clients, but as you obviously know, Cory, it's like people don't tend to operate at the same level of us as us in other departments of businesses. So wanting to increase the lifetime value for a client as an advertiser is very hard, because a lot of it is dependent on business decisions, what they decide, their customer journey. Like, if someone's buying some clothing, what would be the most appropriate next round of clothing for them? Do they have new product drops, or do they tend to know that people who buy this tend to buy these things? And there's a lot of business intelligence that goes into that. And depending on the level of the business, if they're a small business, medium, or large, the investment of time and energy and effort into those things does range. So that's why it's also challenging, because it might be more beneficial for lifetime value to increase. I think that's the best one. But the capacity of the internal people and the stakeholders to actually facilitate that very low, usually very low probability, unless like they're very switched on. So then that's why I can understand why people do get so caught on rice. It's like, let's just get the money now.
Yeah.
To that kind of fixes the problem that our back end has an issue with.
Right. Yeah.
It's the same with like lead generation when like people have bad salespeople. Like we just need better quality leads and more of them. So then someone with a really bad sales rate kind of can hit their quota of outcome-based numbers because it's just like we've got to, they're just got to hit the numbers.
Yep.
So
got it.
It's very different.
This next one, I think, it's a big one. It's and it's always brought up in the nerdy circles that we hang out on online around PPC and just online marketing in general, and especially in the social media marketing side, which is, I'm going to just say it as like broad reach versus relevance, right? Always something that this is where I find businesses, if they've been doing it in-house for a long time, this is where they really find a lot of friction. Yeah. Where their lack of expertise really starts showing, and it's not even like throwing shade on those people. It's just you're expected to do so many things working internally in a marketing department. I understand. So when you start getting to where you need to reach maybe a little bit more broad of an audience, but you still need to keep efficiency at a profitable level. That's when you call the experts, because that is a real tough thing. As no matter what anyone tells you, that is going to be one of the hardest things that you can try to accomplish.
Do you find that most in-house companies do go for the broad reach over the relevancy?
Over time, once things reach a point of stability, we're not constantly launching new things. We've kind of gotten out of the game of constant promotions and sprinting to the bottom, if you will, or whatever they call that. It does get to a point eventually. But I think in a lot of small businesses, it tends to be relevancy first, because that's where the problems lie. That's where the most immediate, obvious problems lie, is a relevancy issue. But if you work with someone good enough, they're going to recognize where those relevancy issues are. And don't get me wrong, it's never like you're just going to dial in relevancy permanently. That doesn't happen. Again, unless the business is stagnant, which means it's probably going to die eventually anyway, you're going to have constant relevancy issues as you start targeting new marketplaces and new products. So,
and as the market, even as your existing market changes through economic times or the time of the year, it's just the relevancy of your product at certain service at certain times of the year or at just certain times of economic cycles does change.
Absolutely.
It does change. And as you're saying this, the thing that comes to mind, and I'm not sure if this is the linkage, is like brand versus direct response. You're trying to do that thing where you've got the broader approach, building the brand, versus going for that relevancy direct approach, trying to get people now. And the balance between that, because, the thing of seeing a lot of, most people want the direct relevant approach. They do want it. It's just executed very poorly. And then it ends up being the broad approach accidentally, and it doesn't even serve them. It's not done because if you do want to do that broad approach, the branded approach, there are very specific ways you need to go about it. And those very specific ways are not the same ways that people do accidentally doing the broad market approach.
Well, and I got to say, the reality check here is you might get sold from an agency says, we are going to be able to expand your reach. I use expansion very intentionally because Google loves putting that in their marketing materials. Expansion. Broaden the reach, broaden your audiences, broaden your targeting, but we're not going to sacrifice relevancy, guys. No worries. So we're just going to scale you to the moon, and you won't even have to worry about return ad spend or relevancy tanking at all. But the reality, if you're working with an ethical agency, they're going to be honest with you. They're going to tell you that as you start expanding who you're going after, guess what? You're going to get more irrelevant clicks. It's just the nature of what we're doing. We're experimenting with a new thing in a new area. You're going to have to figure out where the irrelevancy is coming from so you can negate that. But that's all a part of the iterative process that is paid search or any kind of online marketing.
Definitely, mate. Conscious of time, do you reckon we jump onto our next subject?
Sure, let's go for it. We can always do a part two. No worries.
Yeah, because this is good. There's definitely more things to do, and I'm getting all jazzed up about it. But I reckon we've got another really good topic which we can jump into now.
All right.
So which one do you want to jump into?
Well, I was going to say, which one did you have in mind?
There's two more. I reckon the agile loop for Google Ads. I like that.
Okay. Well, we were just kind of talking about it. So if you're watching a separate episode, watch the full episode because then you'll get the
Yes.
first part of
Always watch
this.
the full episode. You'll
Always,
learn way
always watch.
more.
Yeah, yeah, and like and subscribe and comment. Let us know how things are going.
Yeah.
All right, Michael, you want to start us off on this, the agile loop, or you want me to hit
Yeah.
it with the technical side first? Where this
So
even
the
came
agile loop is an approach. Corey just taught me this before. I think when you get good at what you do in life, this kind of really is what tends to happen, which is the agile loop is measure, learn, tweak, report. Is that correct, Corey?
repeat. But yeah.
Oh yeah, repeat. Sorry. Yeah, repeat. So measure, learn, tweak, repeat.
And you will report.
And
Yes.
yeah, and yeah, maybe sending a report
You
out
probably
here or
should
there.
be.
And I think when you were sharing that with me before, it's like it's such an unconscious being like a natural process that does happen over time when you do this well, is that you do go through these processes of measuring, reporting, tracking, all those things, learning, feedback loop, self-reflection, and then tweaking it, making next decisions, and then repeating it. Not reporting it, but repeating it. And depending on where you are at your journey, if you're a business owner running your own account or you're a specialist or an agency, you do need to go through this because the biggest part of advertising is the data side. And the good thing about Google is that you still have so much more data than any other marketing channels ever had in history. And for a channel that still has the potential to be quite direct, that if you do these things properly, you can have a lot of success. Now, with the measure, the learn, tweak, repeat, the learning is actually learning from your own data, not from someone else's checklist, not something. So I think a
Yes,
lot of this
exactly.
is a lot of critical thinking, aligning it with your business and really knowing based on my industry, based on my business, based on the season we're in at the moment, and all these other things within the business, our goals. That's where the learning takes place because advertising is there to support your outcomes in your business, not how do we just get advertising to work, because you can have the same business with two different goals and your marketing and advertising and Google ad strategy can be completely different rather than just going, this is what we do for your business and then it works.
Right.
So anyway, that's a bit of a rant there. What are your thoughts, Corey?
So here's the thing. I think when you hear this, you think, okay, yeah, measure, learn, tweak, and repeat. Yeah, I mean, we know that already, right? Common sense. Here's the thing. A lot of cognitive biases, if you're not familiar with that, they are going to get in the way of your perception of what you think is actually happening in reality. Now, here's what I mean. You could say, okay, measure. Do you know how to really measure it? Are you measuring it properly? That's always a big question.
Yeah.
When you say learn, are you just keeping that in your own brain and saying like, all right, I think I get okay that, and then what about 6 months later? Have you recorded those learnings somewhere so you don't keep making the same mistakes? Very, very important. And then in terms of the tweaking, it's like, okay, so we learned that this bid strategy at these levels of settings, whatever, doesn't seem to work. We hit diminishing returns at this point. Okay, let's go ahead and tweak that, right? But again, if you didn't apply the recording of that learning in the past step,
Yep.
you're going to probably eventually make the same mistake where you're like, yeah, let's go ahead and push this. Let's move it to this setting because things happen 6 months down the line. You forget. I mean, again, if you're keeping it all in your just conscious memory, well, you're going to make mistakes and then the only thing you're repeating at the last step is the same mistake over and over and over again. So my point is, even though it seems very commonsensical and very obvious, you have to dig into each part of these and build systems that ensure that you are following each of these and you're actually staying true to the process that you're really honoring the process. You're not just saying to yourself, all right, I want to make sure we're checking all these boxes. We're measuring. Good, I measured it. I'm learning. Okay, great. Okay, now I got to tweak and then I got to repeat that. This is a cycle that you need to keep yourself accountable to, and usually systems and processes, SOPs, are going to be how you do that.
Yeah. And logging it. I think that, as you mentioned, the most important thing is logging it. We've got for all of our clients a strategy doc where we put in the changes that we make, not like that we did this bid, but more of the strategy changes based on either the conversation with the client or based on like major data that we're seeing. Just so then over time, you can actually see like the bit of like the journey that's been, because Google Ads, like the change history, Facebook, like it doesn't tell the journey. You've got to document why you made something. And just, it doesn't need to be crazy, just like a sentence, because if it's, you're right, like we live in our own confirmation biases and our own feedback loops. So if we're like, yeah, I do this for most clients, you're just going to keep doing that even if the data is suggesting something different, or you could have done it 3 or 6 months ago, it didn't work, but then you're like, yeah, but I would do this for every client. So then you just kind of go back on something that you've already done. And we all do it. Like we all do it. No one's immune from it.
Right.
It's like you've still got to show up every day to make those decisions. And I do this stuff. So I'm glad that you brought it up, especially the documenting side of it, because that's where I've noticed that a lot of clarity comes from. Like, oh, this didn't work. Cool. Let's actually try something different and try it different with conviction rather than like, oh, should we try to go back to this, or what do we do from here?
I'll tell you that it is a game changer, and I've heard this from consulting clients as well. Being able to implement some kind of events log, something that just, like you said, mostly is about reasoning. So you have sort of a journal or a log, some kind of tracking around reasoning, because man, when you work with a lot of accounts and there's a lot of moving pieces, being able to go back and trace your steps into the reasoning behind a major strategic change is just invaluable, especially when things don't go well and you need to go back and explain to stakeholders what was the thinking along the way. Sometimes it happens. No matter how good you are, there are going to be times when you can go, no, actually all of this made sense why we did it. I know it was 9 months ago, but this is why we did it initially. And then we can also see when clients request things. I like to put that in there too. Client is requesting that we need to, double the budget or something. It's good to have that because it keeps everybody, including yourself, accountable to what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing. So anyway, that's the Agile Loop. Michael, any last thoughts on this one?
No, I love it. I think, documenting the journey, because it's more than just yourself doing it. It's you. This is a team approach. So you need to make sure people are accountable towards the different parts and how each part affects other parts. Absolutely. That's a big thing why we have our logs, our strategy docs, is actually just to make sure that we do the stuff that we do, we say we're going to do. Clients don't most of the time. So it also keeps them accountable to that. So then knowing that at certain stages, if things don't go well and there's like a part of that project steps has been missed. So then if things aren't going well in a certain amount of time, you can go back and be like, we did this for this reason, and these were the accountable parties for it as well. I know it kind of goes a bit off, but it all kind of blends into the same thing.
Yeah. Awesome. Shall we move forward to the next and last topic of the day?
We should.
Okay, we got time. We can do it.
So, biggest mistakes small businesses make with conversion tracking on Google Ads.
Okay.
A big title for a simple thing, but is the biggest issue. So, Cory, you and I see a lot of Google Ads accounts.
Yeah.
Conversion tracking is always the number one thing we look at. We analyze, we audit, and find most of the mistakes in.
Yes.
So, the biggest mistakes with conversion tracking, what do you think they are?
Well, let me also just set the scene here, because I mean, when you look at a new account, whether you're looking at potentially taking it over for management or you're going to consult on it, whatever. Again, it isn't just, I think we hear it so often, like check the conversion tracking, that it's sort of it just becomes noise. And we're like, okay, I get it. I need to look at the tracking. And when you get, again, going back to confirmation biases, when you get so used to looking at a lot of accounts, sometimes you can make the error of going like, it looks good on the surface, like it's probably fine. Like the last agency, I've heard of them before. I'm sure they thought this through. You got to be real careful of those assumptions, because not every rep takes the same amount of accountability for the accounts that they manage. And sometimes it's just a knowledge gap. They didn't think through whether the tracking was set up properly or not. They sort of inherited that tracking from somebody else, or maybe the client's internal team had set that up and had conveyed a lot of confidence in what was set up. But again, just don't go into it assuming that everything is fine, because at the end of the day, the whole purpose behind this is so that before you look at the numbers, you want to know, let's use the metaphor of someone goes in the doctor's office, which is what we're kind of getting, right? We're getting a client that's saying there's problems or there's opportunities. We are looking to you to give us advice or to implement something that's going to get us to our goal. Well, when we're going to look at the data to determine what the symptoms are, we need to actually go through and do the tests. And the tests on the patient in this case, and the data we're going to look at, is the conversion tracking. Because if that we find is invalid, or it's not a full picture of what's really happening, we start creating diagnoses and things that are going to actually solve the problem for a problem that actually isn't what you think. It's almost like someone went in the lab and they moved the blood vials around, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden the results we're thinking is actually for a different patient. So we have to be
Yeah.
very careful about that. And that's the whole purpose. So I know this is brought up a lot around conversion tracking, but it's so key. So anyway, that was my initial thought and
Yeah.
rant on conversion tracking.
Yeah. The biggest mistakes that I see is either conversions not being tracked, the right conversions not being tracked, the wrong conversions being tracked, and the volume of conversions not being tracked correctly, either undercounting or overcounting. So the accuracy of the actual conversions and the accuracy of the volume of conversions. And then the next thing would be the settings around the conversions towards, you can be tracking a lot of things, but what are your campaigns moving towards? What are the campaign goals? Now, that's quite specific, but it's also quite generic enough just that these are what happens. Wrong goals being set up, no goals being set up, tracking's under, tracking's over, and the campaigns are not aligned with it. And if you don't know what the bullseye is, you're never going to hit it. You know, if I know there's a specific spot on the wall I need to hit over there, it's easier for me to try and aim for it and go for it rather than if it's all these things around the room with with a blindfold on.
Right.
So I think with a lot of small businesses with advertising as well, and a lot of people who pick up accounts, there's just an assumption that it's been done right in the past, as you've mentioned, regardless who does it, because it's like, well, who am I to question this? Like, does it undermine the last specialist? Does it undermine the business owner who knows the business so well, especially when they're extremely anal about their ad account? But it's pretty wild that the accounts that I see that have the most someone's got such a stranglehold on it, like with the actual ad account, like the clicks and stuff. That's when the tracking's off because they've focused on everything except that the main thing, which would be the conversion tracking at the end of the day.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the conversion tracking, I keep looping with it. It's just like it's usually off. It's usually off. And the small things, especially as you grow and scale accounts over time, that's where the biggest issues come from. And especially if you're trying to take on an account and then take it to like really improve the business. If their old data is incorrect and they're starting to compare your current data to their old data, like I had that the other day with a client. He's like, oh yeah, like before you were doing this, the conversion rate was like X% higher. I'm like, dude, you're double counting. And they forget that stuff. And it's like, because now they've got like people have anchored numbers in their head that are false.
Right.
So that's probably the biggest mistake is then having false numbers and false KPIs based on like nothing. But for some reason, they never realize that they were never getting the results in their bank account that the numbers were representing, and they just never had like the common sense to go, hey, where's the gap here?
Absolutely.
They're just my thoughts.
No, 100%. I think it also lends to, because you mentioned double counting, and I even see that for lead generation, right? Where they are tracking every conversion and it's like a demo request. And sometimes people hit the back button and then do it again. And then Google tracks that as 2 conversions. Now you have an inflated deflated CPA, an inflated conversion rate. And now Google sees that as, oh, we got 2 conversions for the brand. Like, okay, like we should really go down this road in terms of algorithmic bidding. So it's very dangerous to make sure you're always not assuming. I think that's really the big theme here. Don't assume that everything is correct. And even if you set it up 6 months to a year ago, things do change. Enhanced conversions happen. Maybe you need to start utilizing offline conversions.
Clients break their websites, make changes in my websites without telling you.
Yeah, and new things to be tracked, which give you additional insights for analytics work, are going to pop up. And sometimes the client forgets to tell you. There's a new micro conversion that you can track on the site. Maybe they just launched a newsletter they're really going to be pushing now. Well, make sure you're tracking that. Maybe you didn't have that set up because it wasn't available as a micro conversion in the past. So even if it's your own setup and you've been working with the client for a while, always just schedule it. Just put it into like check out, observe conversion tracking, see what's being tracked, see if anything new needs to be tracked. It's really, really invaluable because especially with a small business who it usually has less data points to optimize around, if you can get those micro conversions, then it can be a really big deal breaker for success over time.
Beautiful. Cory, awesome, mate. So we'll wrap that one up there and we'll wrap up the podcast now.
All right.
So how good's that? Cory, how can people find you and be graced by your beautiful presence?
You can be graced by my beautiful presence on LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, and adsbycory.com.
Beautiful. And are you going to tell people how they will be graced by my presence?
Yes, Michael, where can people be graced by your
Beautiful.
presence?
Michael Nadalin on LinkedIn, marketlead.com.au, MarketLead on YouTube, and the PPC Unfiltered podcast, which you are all gracefully watching.
All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. Tune in for our next episode. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you soon.
See you guys.